What's up, guys? Now we're going to talk about building your credit, right? So, building your credit is something that people don't talk about enough because it's simple to overlook, right? If you have bad credit, it's an issue. But if you have good credit, you never think about credit again. So, like, I have decent credit. I don't even think about it as a concern for most things. And it wasn't until recently that I was like, oh, yeah, man, that's actually really important because a lot of service members, when they join, have either no credit or maybe bad credit, and that's going to prevent them from good car interest rates. That's going to prevent them from buying a house. It's going to prevent them from, I mean, it just messes a lot of stuff up, right? So this is how you build your credit. It's coming from it, whether your credit's not great or if you have none. The first thing you should do is you should get a copy of your credit report for free from annualcreditreport.com, and that'll break down the three bureaus, Experian, and I'm drawing a total blank right now on the other two, but it'll break out the three different bureaus and your credit score. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go through that credit report and look for anything that's inaccurate, whether that's that it says you don't have credit and you do, or that it says you do have credit that's not actually yours, or there's something on your name that's not actually yours, or maybe it says something's in delinquency or at collections that's not. You want to make sure that everything's accurate. So you want to go through and look at that. And if you have no credit history, then that's fine. But you should still pull this just to take a look and see what may or may not be on your credit right now. And you're going to want to actually read it and understand it, because if there is something on it, an error or whatever, you're going to want to dispute that, right? So you're going to have to go through the credit bureaus to do that, and that's another video for another time. But if let's say you have something that shows as collections that shouldn't, or you have something that like a line of credit that's on your account that's not yours. Like when I first joined the military, at one point there was a card on my credit that was actually my parents, and I didn't know that I'd been, like, they had signed me as like a cosigner or whatever to help me have credit. So I called and talked to them about that, and it ended up being fine. But like, I wouldn't have known that that was on there if I hadn't checked my credit report. So check your credit report, look for errors, dispute any mistakes, make sure that what's on your credit report actually reflects you as a person. If there are any overdue payments, catch up on them. It's not worth letting something go to collections and tank your credit. Make those payments. If you took the debt out, pay it off. That's honestly, it's painful, but it's less painful than having no credit and trying to buy a house. So pay all your bills on time. Anything that goes over, I think, 90 days gets reported. So just make sure you're making those payments on time. You don't want bad payment history. You don't want stuff like that showing up on your credit, right? Length of credit history. So don't close out whatever your oldest account is. If you have, let's say you have 6 credit cards and you don't use one anymore, if it's the oldest one you have, keep it on your credit, just because length of credit matters. So if that one's 10 years old and then your other 5 are all 1 year old and you close that one out, your credit's actually going to drop. Even if you don't use that card anymore, just leaving that credit line open. Man, I got a frog in the throat. What in the world? Just leaving that credit line open will help you as far as maintaining your credit, because it's going to show a longer history, right? And then credit utilization. So what this means is, if you have, let's say you have a $10,000 limit on your credit card and you owe $2,000 on it, that's 20% of your credit that's utilized. Now, if you have that same $2,000 balance, but it's on a credit limit of $4,000, that's a 50% credit utilization, which as far as your credit goes, a higher credit utilization rate hurts you more. So honestly, it would hurt your credit more to have $1,000 on a credit card that has a $1,500 balance than it would to have $10,000 on a credit card that has a $40,000 limit, right? Because the credit utilization rate is higher, and that shows that you're increasingly getting closer to maxing out those credit cards. So one of those tricks, if you're trying to increase your credit, is if you have $2,000 on a card, maybe you call them and ask if they can increase your limit, right? Because if it goes from 5,000 to 10,000, you just drop from 40% to 20% credit utilization. The trick here is obviously not to spend that extra money. So don't do that if you don't trust yourself to, like, actually just increase the limit and not pretend that it happened, right? If you're going to spend that money, don't do it. But having a lower credit utilization will actually help you out. Pay down your debt strategically. So pay off the highest interest rate debt first to save money, but sometimes psychologically it's easier to pay off like the smallest dollar amount in debt and then roll that. But what you want to do is what's called the snowball or avalanche, which means either if you go high interest first or lowest dollar amount first, you want to focus like minimum payments on everything and then focus all of your money on paying off that one debt. And then as soon as that's done, you roll what you were paying on that into the next biggest debt, and then boom, boom, boom. And that's the fastest way to pay down debt. I've got an article or two on that, so if you want a lot more information on like the debt snowball, it's out there. It's also mentioned in the book. What if you have no credit? There's a couple different ways you can do this. I'm going to mention it a little bit more, but the secured credit card or an authorized user are the best too. So authorized user is like what my parents did, where they had a credit card and they put me as a user for that credit card so that I could build credit even though I wasn't using the card. And then secured credit card is like you pay $1,000 and then you're using a credit card, but it's based on that $1,000 that you have stored on the card. So it's kind of like a cross between a debit card and a credit card. Not the best thing in the world, but if you don't have credit, that might be what you have to do in order to build credit. So just know that even if you don't plan on using debt ever, having a good credit score is honestly very beneficial. So I don't necessarily prescribe to the Dave Ramsey idea of like you don't need credit cards, you don't need debt, you don't need anything, so you don't need a credit score. I think you absolutely do need a credit score because at some point in your life you may need debt. If you want to become a real estate investor, debt's like your best friend. So debt is like any tool, right? If used properly, it can be very beneficial. But it can also be very bad. So either way, you'd rather have a better interest rate on any debt you take out. And so it's worth getting a good credit score. So next up, we're going to talk about credit cards, the do's and don'ts.